So I got a bunch of things to tell you about this week.
Yeah.
It was a pretty interesting week for sure. And we didn't really caught up a little bit that one day, briefly, but mostly just via text. So I left Sunday and came back home last night. The Sunday I took off and went to Florida. Had a meeting Monday with the team. Met a guy at the airport who manages the Florida region, and we're on the same flight. We're going to fly down to West Palm, and you know how I fly a lot, right? So I've been on a lot of good, bad, and ugly flights in my life. The bad ones are the ones you remember, because the good ones you don't remember because they're good. There's no problems. And I would say this is probably the second worst flight I was ever on, as far as the flight itself. I've had weird situations on flights before that made them bad for different reasons, but the people around me, that kind of thing. But this year alone, I'll probably, in the last 2 years, 2017, 2018, I'll be just short of 200,000 miles, right? So that's just in the last 2 years. A lot of flights. And for this to be like sort of the second worst flight I've ever was on, made it very memorable. So a lot of times when you get on a flight and the pilot knows, hey, we're going from A to Z and we're going to run into turbulence, or this is the scenario, they give you a little bit of a heads up. They say, hey, this is probably what the flight's going to be like. So, early part's good, bad part's great, whatever it is. And they didn't do it on this flight. So, I have my own routine, put my headphones on, play some games while I'm waiting for the internet to kick in. And I had to do some work on the flight because I had not really finished everything I needed to do for the meeting the next day. So I had every expectation that I was going to spend, half of the 3-hour flight working on my laptop. So we take off. My normal routine, headphones on, listening to music, playing some games, waiting for the internet to kick in. And so, the next thing you know, we start hitting a little bit of turbulence. And it was, and when I mean a little bit of turbulence, I meant like it was very dramatic, but at the same time, I've had sort of short bursts of dramatic turbulence and you don't think anything of it. So it really didn't faze me. But again, I still kind of have the headphones on, not really paying attention. And then all of a sudden, it gets really bad to the point where the plane is tilting, right. It's almost like it's banking and turning right because and you could hear the wind, whistling. I was on the window, so you could hear it whistling over the plane, right? And it was again, was it temporary? I don't know. I had the headphones on. I found out later that the reason why I ended up taking the headphones off was because I heard them talking on the speaker. And apparently what had happened was the flight attendant was so nervous that she screamed, "Everyone sit down." So fortunately I didn't hear that part, but it was loud enough for me to pull the earbuds out. And I guess the pilot must have heard the flight attendant, because 2 minutes later the pilot says, very calm, hey, we've obviously run into a little turbulence, and by this time we're probably a good 5 minutes of this experience going on, ups and downs, and again, primarily banking to the right, which was, a very strange feeling to have while you're on a flight. And next thing you know, he's kind of like just talking along, getting everything, everyone prepped that it's all going to be okay, and that it's just turbulence, ran into some weather, and what was probably the funniest part of it to me was how he kind of calmly says it's all, this is what's going on, and then he has this real long delay between the last thing he says, like, we're going to last for, this is going to last for another, and he's like almost doesn't want to say it because he knows that people aren't going to be happy. Another 15 to 20 minutes, and the whole plane's like, oh my goodness. And so for a solid 20 minutes. If I really don't know, but it could have been up to 30. We were banking. We felt like the plane was banking right when it wasn't. It was just literally just almost like leaning into the wind, because the wind was so strong. At the same time, we're going up and down, up and down, up and down, side to side. So it was one of those where when the flight was finally over, you get off the plane. I look at my colleague who was sitting, a few rows ahead of me, and we just kind of looked at each other like that wasn't good. And but we were, all right, now we got to get to the hotel, But I guess individually we're just processing it, however we were processing it. And then the next day, it was kind of like that's when we both realized like that was really not a good flight. Like and that's when he told me about the flight attendant, screaming, and so we both obviously were processing how bad this flight was. And for me, it was like I said, I was already going through the process of ranking this in all-time worst flights, and the fact that it's actually ahead of the flight that I was on when the engine actually blew in midair, and then the pilot somehow got us, from 30,000 to 0 feet in 15 minutes, which normally takes an easily 30 to 45 minute descent time. That wasn't as scary as this one because it was just a single incident. Engine blew. Everyone was like, "What was that?" The pilot turns around and says, "Hey, our engine just blew. We're going to have to make a landing, an unexpected landing." And then we did, and it was a very smooth flight and all the way down, and there were no real issues other than that one single thing. But to have this sustained, violent shaking and experiencing a banking type of scenario, I had never had that before. So it helped. I tell that story because it helped my week. It helped my week because I was, it was a long travel week. It was a very important week for me as far as work. And but I was not necessarily stressed out about work, the specific meetings, but there was a lot of sort of internal struggles and frustration that existed, and I knew going into the meetings had to be addressed in a certain way, and in many ways I was, now that it's all over and I'm home and the week's over, it puts into perspective that experience really helped me to have the right perspective of what was important. And how to make sure that you're prioritizing the correct things, and at the same time, making sure that you're experiencing things in a way that allow for you to appreciate them in the now, as well as not overemphasize things that are temporary, good or bad. So I was able to sort of help to deliver that type of message in my meetings that probably wouldn't have come if I didn't have that experience, right? So overall, it ended up being a great work week, and I do think that part of that is because of that experience that started the whole week off. That if I would have said I want to have a violent flight to start my week to make my week better, who would have signed up for that, right? So I just wanted to start this whole conversation off with that experience because, obviously, like I said, I hadn't had a chance to really share that with you, and at the same time, it probably will tie into some of the conversations we have today.
All right, you ready to have some fun with that?
Absolutely. It's
okay.
It's. By the way, I also referenced you in one of my meetings, not you specifically as far as your name, but we were talking about some of the challenges we're having internally, and how it's important to put things into perspective, like I said, and also understand that there's always going to be challenges when you're growing as an organization, and I simply said that I have a friend of mine, with one of these extremely positive people who I'm fortunate to have in my life, but there are times when I just want to complain for 15 minutes, and your response is, isn't that great that you could have this experience that makes you grow, because without pain you don't get growth. And sometimes, because my point was to them was, there are many, many times that we want to just sit back and complain, but the reality is that statement you make to me is always true. I know that that's where growth is. but we all have those moments when we just want to complain for 15 minutes. and the important part of that is, if you're going to do that, no problem, but get to a place where you can turn that back into positive, as well as understanding that, there's no value in just, sitting around and wallowing in those, the self-pity or the frustration or
Yeah,
whatever.
if complaining gets you to greater action faster, then it could be a positive, useful tool.
Absolutely. and you can only do that if you have the mindset to do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have some fun with your flight.
Okay.
So what is worse, a physical trauma of dropping that fast, or a mental trauma of sort of tying into knowing and being in control and what a normal flight should feel like, and sort of being an area in the unknown, not just with an idea, but to the level that your life is on the line, or you would feel that your life is on the line?
I would always say mental. I think partially because I in that particular case it was all mental, and I think most of the experiences we have, especially the ones that drag on, are way more mental than physical. Physical trauma tends to happen in an instant, like real bad trauma, car crashes, that kind of stuff. At least that's the way my mind's processing that question right now. I mean, I'm sure we could sit back and think of deteriorating diseases and,
that head into the mental, right? And just like we've been trying to cure ourselves, I think more of absolutes. I think you can answer that from either perspective, but it's good to know that I guess it's 3-pronged. It could be mental, it could be physical, it could be mental to physical, or physical to mental. Actually, 4 prongs.
Yeah,
but I guess most are better. Yeah,
let me just expand on that just a little bit, because the mental part, I just really shared that story because most of our conversation would be around sort of these bigger topics, generally speaking, and how that applies to work or personal. But it also was an interesting experience for me personally. How did I handle that experience? How did I process that? Because I will say, as I've gotten older, my ability to deal with challenging flights, especially, has changed. There was a time and a place early on with flying where I had one experience where it was a complete anxiety attack on the plane. Like I was standing there and I wanted to rip the door off the plane, back by the flight attendants, because in my mind I needed to get off this plane. Like, they had to calm me down to such a level that, I was at such a high anxiety level that they fortunately I had great flight attendants that took care of me and, made me calm down and everything. And then I went through a whole lull of never having any problems on flights at all. It just seems to be kind of ramping up again. But anyway, my point is that I kind of personally went through a good experience for me, because it put me through experience that I've never had before. On, hey, if you think you're going to really die in the next 20 minutes, what are you thinking about? What are those things that you're focused on? And I got to experience that, and it was, it was a gift in many ways to be able to know that, hey, sure, am I going to be upset and frustrated, concerned, whatever the quick emotions that go through you, but ultimately when I actually calm myself down, thinking about the things that are important to me, the people that are important to me. Did I leave it all on the table, as it relates to life, and obviously we can all say no to that question, but as much as you can say more yes than no, that's really ultimately what you want to be. You want to say, I've left it on the field more yes than no.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, sorry, that was a sign.
No. So do you feel that living in what you know and living in the comfort of what you know, that you're capable of the same growth as the uncomfortableness of the unknown, or really realizing that maybe you're in a situation that you're not controlling and you have no idea how it's going to end?
Well, I think, there's always going to be, probably the short answer to that, I would think, would be that it always depends on how you embrace the scenario, right? Whether it's the unknown or the known, comfortable, uncomfortable. It's all about how you're going to decide to embrace that. I'm sure there are people that find a way to grow in whatever way because they say to themselves, oh, okay, I'm comfortable here. Now I feel comfortable enough to grow. We know that during that growth, there's some uncomfortable aspects to that. And then there are other people that, thrust themselves into uncomfortable purposely because they know that's where growth is. And they never, anytime they feel comfortable, that becomes an anxiety problem for them because they know, hey, this is not where I grow. So I'd imagine that it really depends on how you as an individual find yourself growing historically, even if you're even self-aware enough to be able to make those types of decisions. Most people, unfortunately, I think, don't realize they grow until either they're in it or they're already through it, right? Then they look back and go, oh, I really grew from that experience, even though it was painful, right? So I think most people are not conscious of, hey, I want to consciously put myself in uncomfortable so I can grow, or hey, I'm comfortable enough now to make an attempt to grow and I'm going to jump off from that point. So
now here's a question about paralleling. Now we know that the plane isn't the filter, you're the filter of the experience. So whether it be you trying to get off a plane or what you went through now, what do you feel is a better question. Do you feel you're paralleling how you live your life, even though as you live it, the volume on that parallel may be so low that you can't hear it, but because you were thrust into a situation for the volume to be at 10, you can really see how you are living your life.
Yeah, I mean,
So take us back to clawing off the plane. Where are you clawing off your life?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the parallels, I guess it's more of it's almost like it gives you an idea. These experiences always give you a snapshot of where you are in your life as it relates to being happy or content, or are you on purpose, or you know what I mean? Because when you look at
so you're saying if regret or gratitude shows up, like
yeah, right. But I will say that there were moments during that stretch where I was very comfortable flying that it didn't necessarily have anything to do with it was almost like that was also a reflection of not that I was super happy and I was super content. I would say that many times on those types of flights, I was more hopeless. I was more like, I don't even care if this plane goes down because I'm just so hopeless in my personal life, professional, whatever. So it's not just sort of this one little snapshot of sort of, are you happy, not happy? It also can be, how extreme are you in the other direction, because I would say that although I do answer this question the same way all the time, which is what is the happiest time in your life? And I always answer that question right now because, there were happy times in the past and things we did, but you should always try to make right now the happiest time of your life, right? So whether it is or it isn't is a different thing. That's a results-driven question. Like I can then look back and or I can specifically say, am I happy today? And it might be a yes, no, but when you kind of put a bunch of days together, you're ultimately trying to make that your happiest time, and then you move on to the next thing. So there is something there as it relates to parallels, but you'd have to almost dig into the specifics of the situation to say, okay, this experience happened, and where were you? And then kind of plot that on a graph, if you will, to see if there's plenty of data points that you can say. But I would also say that there's probably the counter of that too, which is if you're also to a point where you have no reaction, it could be because you just don't care anymore. You're just like, I don't care if this plane goes down.
So, not that you can know this for sure, but what would be your best guess that brought the flight attendant to responding like she did?
I think a part of it was probably she looked like she was newer, younger, probably hadn't experienced a lot of that yet. I got to imagine that taking that job, there's plenty of flight attendants that, even though from our vantage point, oh, they must love flying, right? That's the assumption we all make. But they're just like people who either do or don't like flying. I'm on flights with people that fly all the time that hate flying, and people who don't fly all the time that love flying. So, and then all the other, more stereotypical people who never fly because they hate to fly kind of people, and vice versa. And that there has to be flight attendants that are all over that spectrum too. So I got to imagine that she was either new within the role, or maybe had other, like, maybe mounting experiences now where she's kind of getting worn thin with those types of experiences. So I couldn't say, like, to your point, I couldn't say what her specific thing is, but I know I've been around enough flight attendants to know that it could be a variety of other things, including just a single personal issue that say, hey, I have a real personal problem happening at home that I really need to prioritize, and this can't be happening right now. I need to be home.
And it could have been your buddy projecting, right?
Correct.
She could have said, everybody sit down, because people needed firm instructions.
Correct.
He could have been scared and saw that as her freaking out, because he was freaking out.
Right. Exactly. And absolutely right. And I was hearing it third hand, so I didn't know.
So I have one more comment about the flight attendant, and then another question about that. So the interesting part is I think what's interesting is, with you having your headphones on, you were unable to have chatter of an influence into your experience, right? Whether you thought she was scared or whether you thought she was comforting, you had your headphones on, so you weren't necessarily, that wasn't a part of your experience.
Right.
And then it was different for him, because he went as far as to remember it enough to mention it, that it was part of his experience. So it's important, the things we listen to and what we expose ourselves to, because they're going to become part of our experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And who knows to what level? Probably to our level of acceptance of belief in what is said. That's probably the level that we allowed into our experience.
Well, let me expand on that, because that was one of the things that became. One of the ways that the week became great is because I started the whole week. I decided to do two things every day to set my mind right for the day, and I don't think that would have been there if I didn't have this experience, right? And this goes to the point you just made about it's about the filter and the information you decide to expose yourself to. In that case, and he didn't have a choice. I was fortunate I had the headphones on, but we do have a choice every day to say, how am I going to start my day? What music am I going to expose myself to? What news am I going to expose myself to? What conversations am I going to start my day with? And when that happens, and at least for me, when I'm trying to get my mind right for a specific purpose for the day, there are a few things that I can historically do that set my mind right for the day. And one of those is, from a music perspective, I'm sitting in a hotel room, and I don't really turn the TV much on anymore, because there's nothing on there that has any positive influence on my day, generally speaking. But I'll throw music on, and I can say, okay, I'm going to have a very aggressive day, so let me throw on some heavy rock or heavy rap or whatever. And most of those days end up being very aggressive and a lot of conflict, and if for no other reason than I'm reacting to information from that perspective, right? So I decided, I'm doing nothing but, Bob Marley specifically, with his channel on Pandora, and then whatever came out of that in sort of a relaxing tone. And then, similar to prayer for you, there's a sort of a meditative exercise that I've been doing for a long time. It can be anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, and it's just a whole process of imagining as I breathe, in and out, I'm inhaling positive, and then I'm exhaling negative, and then after a certain period of time, when I can feel the change in sort of that relaxed state of, okay, that stress is starting to go away, then I go into inhale positive, project positive, right? And that's how I ended up starting every day, and with that sort of a music that got my day kind of relaxed and mellow and ready to go, and then this 3 minute to 5 minute experience as it relates to mindset, and then I was off and running, and there's definitely was positive for me in that way, and that's a similar exercise you do every day as it relates to prayer, right? Is get your mind right, expose yourself to the words and the information and the message that you need to for that day, and then it sets your mind right? So, I mean, I'm talking for you,
right.
but I think that based off of what I know about you, that's
so what value would you put that preparation time as far as your experience of a day?
So, you know, I would say that it's probably the most important thing that I do every day, or don't do, if I don't do it, because if I end up having to go through the day and for whatever reason I'm not as prepared as for work as I'd like to be. I don't have the data that I'd like to have. I didn't spend enough time doing the research or whatever I'm preparing for that day. That stuff I've been around now going almost 20 years, right? So I could probably get through a meeting and kind of wing it, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to be a good meeting, but I have enough like lifetime preparation in these conversations to get me through it, to struggle through it. Where that really comes into play for me isn't just it's just think of the opportunities that present themselves, and I could come from a positive mindset. I feel more open to conversation. I feel more open to back and forth dialogue. I find myself to be genuinely more engaging with people who I may or may not know, where I have a tendency at times to just stay in my head and, oh yeah, oh, by the way, oh hi, so I'm sometimes not aware of the people around me because I'm not the right mindset. So that whole process is so important, because I think it opens me up to experiences and people and dialogue and conversations that I wouldn't have. And then the other part that is probably as critical is when I'm presented with challenging information that day, a challenging situation, my mindset is in a positive place to handle that better than if I'm in a negative place and I just want to fight. And okay, they want to fight, I want to fight. And instead of saying, okay, I might still have to fight, but maybe I'm starting with other options.
Right, so it raises your awareness, and then it makes your influence or impact or involvement in that situation, it changes your trajectory to be a positive influence in those arenas, which is cool that you sort of led into that, because my next question was, where are you in your life like the pilot, and where are you in your life where you wish you were more like the pilot?
Yeah, so I would say that, and again, goes back to the filter. He might have been freaking out up there.
Exactly. But does that matter?
But he knew that at that moment,
because it's how we impact others.
Exactly.
While we're going through what we're going through.
Exactly.
Is what's most important.
Absolutely. And so, there's that knowledge that I don't really know what he was experiencing, but he at least was conscious enough to say, and aware enough to say, in this moment, I can't be, everyone, duck for cover, unless we had to duck for cover. But it was in that particular.
Pit's filling up with foam. Everybody get out of here.
He was in a position to say, okay, this is something we have to experience. So why freak everybody out? Let me just, try to be a calming voice here. So, and let me just finish on that experience, and
Sure.
I think I'll answer that. Because I went through, without knowing what the flight attendant said, there was probably a 4-5 minute period where I was the flight attendant internally. My heart was pounding, right? And I went to my breathing exercises, focused on something in front of me, because I kind of had an open space, kind of a big space in front of me. I wasn't a chair right in front of me. I just focused on something in front of me and just shut down everything. I wasn't even listening to music anymore. Just focused on that. Closed my eyes when I wanted to. Just focused on breathing. Next thing you know, I was the pilot. At least what I thought he was, from a perception standpoint. That voice, very calm, very relaxed. In that particular case, again, talking about what you focus on, I was focusing on my family, my wife, my kids. That's all I was focusing on. That's all I was thinking about. That's all I spent my time, And it wasn't even like I expanded on all these regrets, or it was just simply, I just want to think about them. I just want to envision them. I just want them, I want to, in my mind, project to them that, hey, if these are the last thoughts that I'm going to have, what do I want those thoughts to be for me? And potentially, if they can feel that in that sort of cosmic way, if you will, they could feel that. I don't want them to feel me fearful going down, if they can feel that, right?
Your family.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
I wanted them to feel nothing but love.
And it's interesting that you said that, because I was thinking as you were talking, do you think you calming yourself down and the exercises you went through gave comfort to the pilot?
Me personally, absolutely. I definitely feel like our influence, we're a contributor, and from my perspective, we are contributors to the process in whatever way that is. And if the whole plane went crazy, then he would feel that, and the anxiety would lift the room, right? That would lift that particular experience. And perhaps he would be so anxious, well, maybe we should do this instead of that. And instead of, let's just ride the wave and let's just deal with this wind. And the best course of action is to do exactly what they were trained to do. But, so I personally do believe, maybe not me as an individual, but collectively, everyone was in a place to sort of help that experience. So absolutely, I'm a big believer in that. I know it sounds a little woo-woo and kind of maybe not tangible, but if you kind of go back and think to yourself, you may not be able to control every situation or every experience, but what contribution can you make when you're there, right? And can you be that calming voice for the person next to you that then makes the next person not as anxious, and so forth and so on? Because I will say that I think that the person next to me, whether they might have been going crazy internally, but for me, I couldn't listen to anything. I didn't want to listen to music, and I didn't want to watch any more of the movie I was watching or any of that stuff, because that's not what I wanted to focus on if this was going to be it. Mm. But to see out of the corner of my eye from time to time that he had no problem just continuing watching his movie, that was calming. That was calming for me, even though I was saying to myself, I'd rather focus on these things. Yeah. I don't want to watch this movie or whatever it is. It's not what I want to spend my time thinking about. So, and it ended up being an unbelievable week, personally and professionally. So I couldn't wait to have this conversation, because I knew that this is what I wanted to share, that experience. So, and
it's interesting enough that you can clearly find connections with what you're talking about. You've seen the water things where you play different types of music and how it changes, how it turns into ice, and the crystals and the way they form. So there are connections there, and I always try to relate people back to what a cell phone can do. It always blows my mind that through space, letters can go into words, can go into sentences, can go into books.
Well, break that down even further. It's really, somehow it's electrical pulses that are somehow interpreted as ones and zeros that then become characters that then become
waves, and frequencies or whatever they go through. So
and to be honest with you, with me just saying that, I'm not even 100% sure how that works.
Right.
I just am making assumptions that in my mind that's how that works, even though I could be completely wrong. That's not really how it works.
And all we need to know is enough percentage of it to make it work. It doesn't matter if we have 50% of that's still unknown, and I think the human body is far beyond the phone. So I think it's capable of amazing things.
We only put limits on it.
Right.
We're the ones that put the limits on it.
So after you have an experience like that, are you more or less willing to be uncomfortable or to get yourself in certain places in your life so that you can have effect on other areas of your life?
I probably haven't spent enough time yet because I was, it was such a busy week. Which, by the way, I had to get on 2 more flights that week. So, it's
always a good thing, right?
Yeah, getting back on the horse, if you will, right? But I didn't have any anxiety going on to those flights because, I knew statistically that you'd rather be on the flight you'd rather get on the absolute next flight out when you're on a bad flight, because statistically that flight can't be as bad as the one you just on. You know, so you just know that the probability is really low that you're going to have back-to-back experiences like that. So, but I honestly haven't spent enough time really thinking about that impact, you know, sort of, and how it's going to push my trajectory. I will say that I am, by not just verbalizing this to you, but also I noticed, I was very aware of the week and the changes that I was conscious of making, the conversations that I was having, the reactions that I had, so forth and so on. So I was conscious of it enough to know that it impacted this week so much. The question I think you're really asking me is, how does it now continue on, right? And I don't, obviously I would like to have more of those experiences, both off of this individual experience, but also what other scenarios do you put yourself in to grow in a way that allows for you to continue on that path? And, you know, I don't know the answer to that because I haven't really spent enough time really processing that part of it. But I will say that it definitely led me to 2 conversations with my kids already in a way that I didn't have any. So it's almost like these things are already unconsciously happening without me thinking of, okay, how can I consciously move myself in this direction? But just with you know, my son, it was just text messaging back and forth, you know, while I was traveling, because I hadn't heard from him a little bit. And, you know, all I really wanted to know was, hey, how you doing? And more importantly, do you need anything from me? Right? I just needed him to know that I'm available. You know, we ended up getting into a little bit of a conversation about some of his interviews that are coming up. And I was like, you know, I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews and conducted them. Use me as a resource. Let me know how I can help. You know, what do you need from me? And with the question, what do you need from me, brought all that kind of out. Now, he hasn't said, yes, yeah, I want to take advantage of that yet. But nonetheless, my willingness to be there. Not that I wouldn't be. We'd all be there for your kids, but sometimes you don't verbalize it. Sometimes you just like, oh, well, they know I'm there for them. You know, and it's just so important to make sure, even if they say, oh, yeah, I know. You know, you don't have to say that to me, you know, Dad, whatever. You need to say it. You have to say it. And so then with my daughter last night, and she said, oh, I want to go get, you know, I'll go to get the food with you tonight for dinner. Let's go jump in the car. And she's driving now, and she wanted to drive, and I said, fine. So, you know, we were talking about a couple different things, and that was exactly what I said to her was, you know, after we talked about all these things and, you know, her you know, applying to colleges and all the stress that she's dealing with, you know, my whole thing was, well, you need to let me know how I can help you, what I'm here for you, what do you need from me, you know, and let me know if something in an hour changes that you need from me, or a week from now that you need from me. So those were unconscious things that I did that I would say that I'm always there for them, but I don't know if I would have verbalized it in that way without having that experience. So I think it's already spider webs are kind of going out.
That's what I like about core values and intent, is that it's always enough to get you started. Like whether it be love or caring or just knowing what your heart is for your kids. If you have that as your foundation and you show up, when you open your mouth, you're going to say the right thing.
Yeah.
Or the right thing's going to come out that you didn't even expect to come out, but it came from such a good place that that's where the real power is, versus thinking of all these words to say, but not saying them with the heart, and then just being a bunch of words. Mm-hmm. So I think it's always great to tap into that. And I think that keeps things simple for you too, because if you had to figure out what to say to everybody based on everything they need to hear, which is the most important thing, not what we want to say, it would get confusing. But if you know that if you could love a person, you know you'll be in the ballpark, and that makes you have better conversations. It allows you to have them quicker because you're not in your own head trying to figure it out. And it gives you the foundation you need to make sure you hit the strong points of I love you and I care about you, without trying to find 50,000 words to say I love you and care about you without saying I love you and care about you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it really, you know, connects to I think what we talked about last week and why we're here today, right? Is that it's about taking action, right? It's about, yes, I haven't taken any action yet as it relates to what am I specifically doing for them, but there are times when.
But you did it. You did something.
Yeah, you did. I did, and I think that because to your point about the words are important. Words, you know, you have to tell people how you feel about them, and all that stuff is very important. But when you also attach that to your willingness to take action with them, and then ultimately being able to take action for them, you know, if it's a process, if step one is the words, step two is creating an environment to be available, and step three is actually doing something. You know, it was good to go from 1 to 2, right? And so now I know you had another question, but I'm going to flip this around on you.
I think there's sometimes there is no 2 without 1. Like, how could somebody have the trust to want you to let you be part of their life without knowing that you even care?
Well, absolutely. Because
statement.
and how many times have you been put in a situation where you're asked to do step 2, and you're like, but I don't trust this person. I don't feel comfortable with this person. And sometimes because of work or whatever it is, you have to. But that's when you feel awkward. You're like, this doesn't feel right.
They're asking me to do stuff, you know, exactly. People can get to the point where, and I think that's great, because one of my problems is asking for help. So I actually don't see somebody as burdening me. I'm like, wow, what a great gift that they're willing to go to another place and they realize that they have something to give and take that's going to help them get there faster than they could on their own. I actually don't see that as a burden at all. I see that as a talent.
Well, it's funny that you say it like that, because you know, as far as it's not something you're willing to do, but at the same time you appreciate in other people, partially because you struggle with it, you've identified it.
Well, it's a seed in my life right now that I'm watering.
Right. That's right.
You know, not everything is the rose bush.
Right. And things that you did 15 years ago are things that wouldn't even be something you'd want to do now for a variety of reasons. Not that they're bad. It just is not the right thing for you anymore. And so there's, to your point about the seed growing, is that you constantly have to be planting new seeds, growing, you know, watering them to become something else. And other times you say, you know what, I'm not making that crop anymore. That's just a crop I don't need in my life anymore, whatever that is. And
it doesn't hurt that you put the seed in and then don't water it or anything. That's fine.
Right.
But if you're felt led to put the seed in, you put the seed in.
Right.
Because then the next day you may be led to water it. But you can't water a ground that doesn't have a seed in it.
Right.
So you just take each step as it comes. And
some seeds you just have to let nature water for you.
Right. But you don't want to not plant the seed just because 2 days later you may not feel like watering it.
Right.
Don't decide today what you're going to do tomorrow, because you have no idea what you're going to do tomorrow.
Exactly. Which was what, you know, the statement that I made to you this morning about, what was the thing I put in my text about, you know, today, something about today, making today great or something.
Yeah, I'll tell you something, a fun game I was playing with myself. I don't even know what a vegan is or what a vegan eats, but I've been telling myself I'm a vegan, even though I'm eating meat and everything. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm starting to make better choices because I'm telling myself I'm a vegan.
Sure.
So I'm eating things less that I didn't want to eat, all by playing a vegan game with me.
Sure.
So you don't have to be like, I'm not in a situation where I'm intently lying. I'm lying as a joke for myself to create a response while having fun. I don't have to drag myself through change.
Right.
So it's a joke I'm playing with myself, but I'm getting the response I like. I'm a vegan. I say to Jen, wait, what's all this stuff in the house? I'm a vegan now.
I did the same thing this morning. I'm drinking a cup of coffee and I'm walking by, we got a new like sort of armoire in our kitchen. That was one of the things that was different when I came back, which is always fun when they go out and buy some stuff for the house and it's different. So I look through the new cabinet and I'm grab my cup of coffee and I've been trying to do this intermittent fasting on a regular basis. Some days are easier than others, and some days, you know, around 9:30, your second cup of coffee, you're like, oof, you know, I could really go for something, but just make it to lunch. And I'm looking, it's got all this glass, and I see, you know, I'm looking at it, and I don't see cookies, I see, my brain goes sugar bomb, right? Like, because all I want to do really is eat, and so what my body's like craving, energy, and saying, hey, there's some energy right there. Go eat that energy right there. But because, to your point, I'm not technically doing the keto diet 100%, but that's what I'm telling myself I'm doing, even though at lunchtime I'm like, I'm gonna have a sandwich.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the bread doesn't have any sugar in it.
Yeah.
Just forget that, But you play these little tricks, because even though I might not do it every day, I'm closer to being on the keto diet by telling myself that.
Exactly right.
Than not telling myself at all, because it makes those cookie choices go away. It makes the donut choices go away.
It's just planting the seed.
It's like the David Goggins thing, right? About like tricking yourself. I don't really want to run 20 miles today, so you let mediocrity kick in and win every once in a while. Say, all right, we'll just do a light 6, and then once you're 2 miles in, you're like, fuck 6. I'm going to do 20.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. The last little thing I have is sort of, and you can answer this from both sides of the equation. So if we see awareness and relate it to lifting weights, because that's just the easiest thing to see, incremental things. You can lift 5 pounds for a couple weeks and then you're ready for 10. So some experiences grow that way. But sometimes you can lift 5 pounds for a couple weeks, have a great day, and lift 20, but that's not usually your everyday.
Mm-hmm.
So relating it to the flight, there's times where you've been going through things that have prepared you for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are things about that moment that have stretched you to the point that things less than that will be a little easier, even though those aren't things you were used to doing.
Yep.
And that's the gift of the stretch.
Sure.
The gift of the stretch is everything underneath is a little more possible now that you have something to say, well, that was so much more and I was able to do it this way.
Right.
So it's good in both ways. It's great about the training side. It's great about preparing you for the best way possible to handle the stretch. But the stretch is also nice to have you be able to handle some things that are less than that you couldn't put yourself in those environments every day, but you're much better prepared for because you already know you can do it. Or you see how you'd like to do it better.
Sure. And I think the other, again, a lot of these types of experiences really just put so many things into perspective, right? And it makes you really understand what's important for you, and it minimizes the noise. One of the other things I learned about myself this week was where I was, I was finding myself, good and bad, not having emotional swings related to wins and losses. So as we were losing certain things this week, we meaning myself and my team, my stress related to that loss, the emotional negative swing, the frustration, the anger, whatever it was lessened. 24 hours later, I get great news, a win or two, and I wasn't extremely overwhelmed with joy either, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It's just more of, again, the perspective of the perspective I got because of the situation allowed for me to recognize that, but maybe those things aren't as important as I thought they were.
Well, it makes me think of the pilot. We have a spot we're taking off. We have a spot we're landing. Am I going to have to fly on my left for an hour? Am I going to have to slow down the speed? That's all we're really doing. And we get so stuck on the turbulence that we don't do our best flying because we're so worried about the turbulence.
Right.
And we miss the next correction to make the flight as comfortable as possible.
Right.
Or not. whatever it brings.
Because we're closed off and fixated on whatever those things.
The win or the loss.
Yeah.
And they're not anything. They're just on the ride to the destination.
Right. It's just part of the process, and
we're the only ones that gave them any kind of meaning.
Right. I mean, because there's a flight going on right now that's having maybe even a worse experience than I had on Sunday. But it has nothing to do with me, so I'm thinking that, all flights must be going off swimmingly today, right? That's what we're all thinking, because we don't want that to happen to anybody, so we don't sit around thinking, well, somebody else should be experiencing what I experienced today, that they should have to do that.
Well, how many great books are great because of talking about wonderful experiences all the time?
Right.
a lot of them are great because people can relate to the fact that people are in the same situation they're in, or a little better or a little worse. The starting point really isn't relevant as much as we make it relevant. But what people end up doing with that.
Well, there isn't anything, whether there's a reason why art, movies, music, all these things exist, in our lives, in whatever way they're important to you. The reason why they exist is because they allow for you to have these little tiny experiences that really we all go through in a way that we obviously are not necessarily attached to, but there would be no good movies and good music without some sort of level of meaning and rub and conflict that's in that allows for it to become meaningful. If it was a song, the only song I can think of that's not like that is the friggin' song Happy. Like, how many songs exist out there that are just purely about, with no conflict in there? And I don't really know the lyrics well enough to know maybe there is something in there in the lyrics that says this is why you should be happy because of these negative things. I don't know the song well enough because I only know the chorus, but when you think about anything that you've been attached to with that, it's because that's the way life is. That's what we experience. And that's where meaning comes from, is coming through the other end of something that was tragic, challenging, whatever level of, experience that would have required that growth.
So to end this section, what would you say to positively impact anybody who hears the next 5 seconds?
I think that probably, I've said the word a few times. I think that you have to make situations or experience, you have to go through experiences, but sometimes you have to either make the experience or create a space for yourself to allow for there to be the proper perspective in your life of what's important and what's not important, what's noise and what's real. Sometimes I hadn't even gone through the analysis of what was I going through, what sort of, I guess, negative groove was I in that required this level of shaking. Oh, hey, wake up, have better perspective. I haven't even dug into that nugget of, of possibility, right? It's just, but I think if you're not having those experiences, whether it's forced or it's forced upon you, you have to try to create that space that you take time and you say to yourself, what does this mean for me? Because it gives you the proper perspective to allow to prioritize things in your life that are most important. And then you can then make decisions from there that allow for you to have a happier life, in my opinion. So that's what I would leave.